Hello and welcome to the Voices of Victory podcast show. I am your host, Mario De Leone, once again at approximately 6:40 a.m. East Coast time, and we're going to have some fun. We're going to talk. We are going to talk about respect, RESPECT, right? Today's episode is people stay where they feel respected. So, as you know, if you've been on this channel before, it's a leadership-based channel, and we're going to bring out some very strong key points. And the big question I have for you is, why do people walk away from solid jobs, right? Why? Why do they walk away from solid jobs? It's a good question. It's not always the pay, not always the money, it's not always the workload. It's when they start to feel mistreated or small. That's when it happens. It's the meeting where they get talked over. It's that message that sounded cold for no reason and came from the wrong person. It's the feedback that didn't really land the way it should have professionally. It hit like a hard public slap. So people don't leave because of just one big event. They leave because of hundreds of small, disrespectful moments that say you don't matter here. And that's a very hard pill for anybody to accept because everybody has their limits. Everybody has their limit. That you don't matter here. And this is a leadership channel, and respect is not a bonus in leadership. It's not a nice to have like on the resumes or job descriptions. It is the foundation, the underlying current and foundation. And once that is gone, everything else falls apart. Respect is the absolute currency that is within your team, inside of your team. It's not a title. It's not a perk. It's not a position of power. It's not fancy motivational speeches. It shows up in small, finite ways every day. It's how you speak to somebody under pressure, whether you listen to people or actually cut them off, how you correct mistakes, and whether you protect your team or expose your team to harm. And that's the truth. And this is the truth that most leaders actually miss. That tone matters more than words. Words are crucial. They have weight. They have impact. But tone of voice is everything. We could look at communication as 60 to 70% of tonality makes up communication, and that statistic changes every year in regards to police training. So when it comes down to it, tone makes up a good portion of it. So it's no wonder why people that have avoidant behavior, when a leader wants to meet with that avoidant, that we want to see their body language, we want to see the eye contact, and we also want to see the tonality. That's what's really important. That tone matters. So you can say the right sentence and completely do it in the wrong tone, and it could really hurt the trust of the other person. You can say a very hard, difficult truth. It might land correctly, and that's because you said it with the right tone, and you build on what you said. You reinforce. Whenever you have a primary belief, you'll have a reinforcing. You deliver a primary, and then you have a subsequent reinforcing. Now, this is where most leaders cross that border without actually thinking, because people do what they do on autopilot. We are creatures of habits, and some people just run these old patterns, not realizing that they themselves need to shift this pattern. Praise, for example, you've heard the term like public versus private. Praise in public can actually build respect. However, not everybody feels comfortable with that. Some people do like private praise. I've seen it in my 15, 16 years working with groups and leadership. This is what I've seen. So you can say that hard truth, but that right tone has to be behind it. Correction in public destroys it. And you have to be very careful how that's going to land. Because if someone feels very exposed instead of supported, they'll never forget that. They won't forget. And I've seen it time and time again. I've seen it in situations when people say, oh, I just want to be the devil's advocate. And the leader turns around and says, since when did the devil ever need an advocate? Right? And that's kind of how it goes down. It goes down like that. And then it's like, oh, okay. So if you want to build respect that people actually feel, not just hear, start with these few ideas. Fix your tone first. Fix your tone first. Before the words come out, check how you sound. If it feels sharp, rushed, or dismissive, it will land that way. And keep in mind, there's people that say, oh, but that's just the way I talk. That's how I talk. And I've seen leaders say this, like, that's how I talk. I'm allowed to talk how I want. No, softness doesn't get a vote with that. That doesn't get a vote with me, because being blunt shouldn't be confused with grace, having some grace, right? Being blunt and saying that's just the way I talk is not an excuse for your development in your communication. You don't get to excuse that. Not on my watch. Because quite honestly, if it's sharp, if it's dismissive, it will land exactly. You're just destroy relationships. Like, if you think that communication is going to develop your relationship when you're speaking to people like shit, you have another thing coming. The way you want to understand communication is a bridge. And that bridge invites people to get closer or further away. And I've seen the most brashest leaders possible. They'll just say whatever's on my mind. Well, that's how I'm going to say it, and that's it. You're not a leader unless you start to control that speech, because communication is that bridge. And that's a hard pill for some of these people to swallow, because like, who are you to say that I should change my voice? I'm the person that has enough self-awareness to realize that communication is that bridge. And it's that bridge not just for you. You're not special or selected. It's for everybody. It's for every human being. So we have to slow it down, and we have to speak to people like it actually matters, and like that person actually matters, because they do. You're a leader. You're giving your time, but why not be professional? Do your best. It's going to take practice. You're going to have those like heated moments like, all right, listen, we have a million things going on right now. Let's go ahead and talk about this later. Like, there's going to be moments where you can't address it right there, but don't let it go unaddressed. If you say that you're going to come back to them and talk again, make sure you do. Protect people in public. That's the second one. The first one's fix your tone. The second one is literally protect people in public. If something goes wrong in a meeting, you don't have to call them out. You don't have to mistreat them. You don't have to treat them like shit. Take ownership as the leader and handle that conversation in private. That one alone really builds a great deal of trust. The third idea is pay attention to the small moments, because respect is not these big, grandiose, motivational speeches. That's not it. It's built when you actually let somebody finish their sentence, acknowledge their effort, say their name, and actually listen. Small actions stacked very fast. I'll never forget one of my leaders, whose name I will not mention right now. We'll just call her she. She's a very awesome leader and a great communicator for the years that she's been leading. I was with her, and there was a very rude gentleman who just felt like he can be very alpha and steamroll over people. And she was there, and she's a tiny gal. She was only about like 4'9". She's a very powerful leader, but she was dealing with a client, and the client just kept steamrolling over her. And she said to him, he was like, let me finish. Now, she actually did let him finish, and she actually never cut him off. But she had said, I'm sorry, but I thought you were finished speaking. She said that. So there was kind of like a miscommunication and cross wires, but the client decided to say, I'm going to be an asshole with this woman. And he decided to try to steamroll over her. But she simply had a detachment. She detached herself a little bit emotionally from what was going on, and she simply just addressed it as professional as possible. And eventually it got smoothed over. And I truly believe that she didn't cut him off. He just made it look that way to be manipulative. You see? So things can happen on the other side, because we have to be direct. Be direct. Don't confuse direct with disrespect. Don't confuse the two. All right. You can be clear without actually being cold-hearted to people. You could say, here's what needs to change. And that's a great phrase. Here's what we're going to work on. Here's what we need to change. All right. And that works. When you say something like, you always mess this up, that destroys people. That hurts people. I think what matters, and I've caught myself in that situation where if you're giving ridicule or criticism, you're telling people, don't do this. Don't do that. And they don't hear that. When you say don't think of the color blue, what's the first color you think? Blue. The word don't, the subconscious mind just completely gets rid of that. So when you say don't do that, don't do this, tell people what they need to do versus the don't part. You can say avoid doing that. That sounds better. Or let's make sure that we are doing it this way. It's kind of like the difference between don't sit there versus sit over here. It's a complete opposite. You're speaking in a positive. So you can tell people to do better. Like, hey, I understand that this fell to the wayside. I need you to do better in this area. And that's really a great way to do it. Do better. I need you to do better in this area. I need you to improve in this area. That's okay, right? But when you say don't do that, you always mess this up. It really destroys people. One of them builds growth, but the other actually really winds up creating a whole lot of resentment. So be direct, but you don't have to be disrespectful. Now, what if every person on your team felt respected every single single day that you work with them. It's not hyped up. It's not managed. It's not a nice to have. You wouldn't have to chase motivation and be a motivational speaker. And you wouldn't have to force accountability for anybody. You would simply convey what needs to be done, and this is the direction I'd like you to go. And here's the real shift with it all. When respect becomes the standard of how you lead, not only for yourself, but for other people, when it becomes that standard, there's no need to lead with pressure anymore. You start leading with your heart, start leading with loyalty. And you're no longer being performative. You're not performing. You're reaching a level that most leaders probably wouldn't reach, because bluntness can be an excuse for a lack of grace or a lack of communication. That this is just the way I talk. I can be blunt as I want, And I have been that blunt person. It sucks. It's not fun. And I've had to have some talk with myself. Like I had to sit down and contemplate for a few hours and come to the realization that something had to change in my own speech. I wasn't happy about it, but I still have to do it. You have to do it because it's part of your self-improvement. If you're going to get better as a leader, you have to consider how your words are landing, how they're delivered. Because it's how it's said, but also how it landed, right? And that's another thing too. You could easily say, you know what? Because when someone gives you a comment back, you can say that didn't land exactly how you thought it was, did you? And you can it kind of can be humorous in that way. People might say things, and it may not always land to you that way, and you could easily say, hey, listen, I want to give you some feedback on your communication. And I think what a lot of people do is they take feedback and they attach it to their identity. And when they do that, then what happens is like, I'm a bad communicator. Because I'm a bad communicator, I'm a bad person. And they make that equation. And just because you're communicating poorly doesn't make you a bad person. Most people create that equation. They say, oh, I'm a horrible communicator. I'm a horrible person. I must be a horrible person because I'm a horrible communication. So they make that equation. They take those results and attach them to identity and self-esteem, which is the wrong thing. You have to consider that you're growing, changing every single day. You have to have a little compassion for yourself. Avoid attaching the results to who you are. Just understand that communication is a skill and you're just going to work on it. You're just going to improve that. That's all. Anyway, have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Lead with respect. Take care. See you on the next one.